Fail to go live. What the heck?
Oh, mine says live.
Okay, now it is. I think we're live. All right. Hello, everybody. I'm Karen Mozes, the co-founder of the Business of Yoga presented by Yoga Journal, helping yoga teachers build thriving yoga careers around the world. And I'm super, super excited to be interviewing, unfortunately not in person today, but interviewing a dear friend, an amazing yoga teacher, a meditation teacher, and a lot of other great things that I'm going to introduce you to, Ashley Turner, who I've come to know in the last few years, and who's done some amazing work in collaboration with some other great teachers. And she's here today to talk to all of you yoga teachers, whether you've been teaching for a very long time or you're just starting on your career, on some of her top tips for running your business as a yoga teacher. But I actually want to give the full-on introduction and then let Ashley introduce herself also to our community. So, like I said, celebrated yoga meditation teacher, mind-body psychotherapy intern, writer, speaker. She's the founder of the Urban Priestess year-long mystery school. Really exciting. Creator of several online courses, the Meditation One-on-One virtual conference with over 25,000 participants. Really, really great. And she's got 9 best-selling yoga DVDs and is also the co-author of Aroma Yoga. And there's a lot more to her than this, but this is just a brief interview. What I love to ask you, Ashley, for those students that or teachers that haven't had the pleasure of meeting you, is just give your 5-minute, a 3-minute intro to yoga. How did you become a teacher? Sort of what is your own personal why you're calling in this career, so we can learn a little bit more about you.
Well, I was raised in central Illinois, in Bloomington, Illinois. My parents both grew up on farms, and so I just couldn't wait. I was kind of chomping at the bit to get out of the Midwest, and I came out to Los Angeles, and I went to USC for my undergraduate degree in international relations. And then right after that, I had started acting. So I was living in Hollywood, and I was acting for about 4 or 5 years. And right after I graduated college, I met one of my dearest friends to this day, Govindas, who is the owner of Bhakti Yoga Shala. And his name at the time was Ira Rosen. And we just immediately clicked. And he's one of the first people I met out of college. And I had always been really spiritual, and I had been really physically active. I was an athlete, but I didn't realize at the time, when I was in college, I went through a pretty intense time. I had a great childhood in first 18 years. And then when I was in college, I went through this massive rejection. I was rushing sororities, and I was rejected from everyone. And I really lost my sense of self. And I had been, pulled away from my family, and I have an identical twin sister. And so I was really alone out here in Los Angeles and didn't know where to go, and had all of these emotions of rejection and sort of a betrayal and a massive, insecurity and complex that then sort of exploded, and I didn't know where to go and what to do with it. And the only thing that I did at the time that I knew made me feel better was I kept going to the gym and working out. And eventually I started teaching aerobics back, in college. And so the physical fitness for me, I knew linked to my mental and emotional stability. And I still was depressed, and I still was using alcohol to self-medicate. And I didn't really know that I was depressed. And when I graduated college, I still, then I went right into acting, which was a whole another layer of rejection and fear and insecurity and body image issues. And I met Ira, and we actually started training for the LA Marathon together. But while we were training, and this was back in the, late 90s, 2000, while we were training, he kept telling me about yoga, and maybe we should try training for the marathon with Ujjayi breath, and this breath of our mouth closed and through our nose. And we did that for about 30 seconds and realized that didn't work. But he finally took me to a yoga class. And so as soon as I got into the yoga class, he took me to Brian Kest's Power Yoga in Santa Monica. And I had never experienced anything like it. And I grew up, I was always a very spiritual person. So the yoga was syncing it together. It was syncing the spirituality and the physical fitness and activity that I knew really helped. I didn't have the words at the time, but of course now I know, it's, releasing the feel-good hormones, reducing the stress hormones, just getting me in a better psychological place from the neurobiological standpoint. along with the deep spirituality. And so I became really addicted to yoga, and I started going a lot. And then Ira started teaching yoga. I started going to his class. And at the same time as he introduced me to yoga and took me to Brian Kest's class, he handed me a cassette tape, which I laughed because it was a cassette tape at the time. And it was Ram Dass's lecture titled Dying into Life. And that lecture I've probably listened to, you know, hundreds of times now. And it totally changed my life. And so I did enter through the power yoga doorway, but I also entered just as equally through the doorway of Ram Dass, who I really consider my root teacher. And the practice for me has always been about shaping and evolving consciousness. It's not just a physical endeavor. So I had those two going hand in hand, a strong vinyasa practice with a deeply spiritual and psychologically nuanced practice. And that was my path. And shortly, you know, a few years in, I realized I wanted to start teaching. You know, I had an aha moment in class. I remember to this day on Earth's Power Yoga on Fairfax, corner of Fairfax and Santa Monica. And Ira was teaching. And it just, I think I was probably in Pigeon. And I just all of a sudden got hit with a lightning bolt. Like, if he can do this, I can do this. If she can teach yoga, I can teach. Like, I want to teach yoga. I don't just want to do acting. So I transitioned out of acting and into yoga full time. And that was 15 years ago. So I've been teaching for 15 years. And then the next phase was, after I was teaching for a few years, I kept seeing people having these breakthroughs on the mat and their own emotional releases and aha moments. And of course, that was what had happened to me. It completely transformed my life and really healed me from depression, which I didn't even realize I was depressed. And I knew I didn't have the language or the tools to help people take their yoga off the mat. So I decided to go back to school and get my master's in psychology and really begin to understand the nature of consciousness and psyche from the Western perspective, and then weave those together. So I wrote my master's thesis on the integration of yoga and psychology and how they can really serve each other. And I'm just at the very last tip of getting licensed as a psychotherapist. I have one more exam to take. And yeah, it's been an incredible journey. So that's my passion right now. It's really fusing the Eastern, Western, the science and spirituality.
I love how you just let, you know, the sort of the spiral of curiosity and knowledge and being so in touch with what your next step was and pursuing that. Because it's one thing to realize like, oh, it'll be great, you know, to do this, but actually go and taking your, doing your psychology course and taking all the courses and going through that process, you know, that's a whole different world. And I think that that's why we admire you so much as a teacher, right? Because you're a student too, and you're walking the talk with all of us here. So, we're just so excited to hear your tips. I mean, obviously, I can tell you're extremely driven. You're somebody that don't sit, or you're not sitting around waiting for things to fall off the sky. So I'm sure that that's probably one of the things that makes you so successful. But for those teachers that are on their path and they're discovering for themselves what works for them, what are some of your top tips for them, whether they're beginning or have been teaching for a long time?
Well, you know, I mean, the biggest tip that I say, and I got this straight from my teacher, Brian Kest, you know, he just said to me, I asked him that question, basically, what's your advice for me? And this was 15 years ago. And he said, practice. You know, the more that you practice, and he didn't mean practice teaching, he meant keep your yoga practice going. And he said very simply, the more yoga I'm practicing, the more people show up in my class. And he said, without fail, I'll be up at my house in Topanga. This was Brian. Like, I'll be in my house in Topanga, and if I practice that morning, there is more people in that class that day. And he said, I think it's a direct correlation. It's you know, it's you dedicating yourself to your practice, and it's you being in that river, in that stream of whatever yoga is. You know, in many ways it's ineffable, but you're tuning your instrument and you're calling, you know, in the divine creativity. You're really stating, like, I'm in service to this. I am dedicated to this. I am devoted to this practice. And for most teachers, that's the first thing that goes, and certainly for myself. And I can see when I get off of my practice, you know, it's not easy. because once you start, the thing is, you think that, I think many people have this sort of aha moment, or yoga really changes their life, and the next logical step for them is, oh, well, I want to start teaching. And that might be true. And you might be an excellent teacher, and that might really be your calling. But as soon as you become a solopreneur, and really for many of us, I mean, I certainly, I was acting. I didn't take one business class in undergraduate, not one single class. I mean, honestly, at this point in my career, I was just telling someone, I can't remember, but I was just telling someone the other day, I really wish I had taken, I wish maybe I majored in business, but I definitely wish I took some business classes or even got an MBA, because trying to run a company is a very different thing. And or I wish I had worked at a corporation. I was very, more right-brained and creative and sort of a rebel. And I just couldn't stand the thought of working at a corporation. And now there's so many great creative companies that work very differently, but 15 years ago is a little different story. And I wish I had worked at a company to really have some more of the structural knowledge and understanding hierarchical and just how to create systems for a company. So my point in this is, as an entrepreneur, you can easily get swamped with all of the responsibilities and tasks that we need to do to keep our business running solidly. And often the practice is the first thing that goes. And I see it for myself. So practice is number one. Do your practice, because it'll keep you right-minded and it'll keep your priorities straight. And as we know, we get more efficient when we're meditating and doing yoga, because it weeds out all of the sort of chaos of the mind, and we get, much more sattvic in our behavior.
I love it. And the incredible thing is that at this point, Justin and I have interviewed quite a few awesome teachers just like you. And that comes up a lot. It's not, we're not telling teachers what to say. We come in just like, share your top tips. And that usually is the first one. And I love it because there's consistency. So we know that those that are succeeding at teaching, they are succeeding because they're practicing. So we can't hear that enough, so even if it's just a reminder again, and I think we hear this, that to be an amazing teacher, you have to be an amazing student. And you have to do that on your own, and you have to do with the right mentors as well. And it is absolutely true. The business will take over. We actually work with a lot of teachers. Justin and I will get to the point where a lot of teachers will get to us when they are at the breaking point. That the business is basically running them to the ground, and the practice is the last thing that they're really thinking about. So really, really amazing reminder. So do we have a second tip for our teachers?
Well, I think, that's so interesting. I'm so glad to hear that that's, that's such a through line for people in your interview series. And, what you just said about, you can only take people as far as you've gone. So that piece of, I would add to the practice, not just asana practice, but your own inner journey. And for me, it's shadow work. It's like, it's really taking on, because, yoga is the union of the light and the dark. So it's taking on your shadow work, building your tribe, knowing mentors and peers and colleagues that are going to support you and keep you honest and keep calling you on your bullshit, because people have a bullshit meter, and they're, you're in class, if you're just espousing about some spiritual, notion or concept, and you're not actually doing it or owning it yourself, people can pick up on that. And it sounds rote, and it sounds like you're just reciting something from another teacher that you've had. So I would say, don't teach something until you know it, until it's really in your bones and you feel it, then you offer it. So that's just sort of adding on to that practice, because I think it still falls under that umbrella. But the second thing that I would say is to cast your circle of, really form your inner circle of support. And this goes for beginning teachers, and it also goes for advanced teachers, where look at, there's this quote, I think maybe it was from Jim Rohn, great business leader. Look at who are the 5 or 6 people that you surround yourself by and you spend the most time with. So for me, very early on, luckily I was in relationship with Ira. Like, he was a great mentor for me. So I always had that feedback loop. But then very early on, I saw, you know, in the Santa Monica yoga scene, and again in early 2000s, Sean Korn was blowing up. And at the time, she was still pretty much a local teacher. She had started teaching a little bit nationally, but I just went to her class and I found a way to contact, you know, Ira knew her. And so he put us on, and I don't even know if it was email at that time, literally. I think it was probably a phone call. And just said, hey, my girlfriend, you know, has started teaching and really loves you and would love to just sit down. And I just called her and said, listen, can I take you to lunch? And I went up to Topanga. You know, I took her to Into the Seventh Ray because I knew that I needed a mentor, and I saw where she was going in her career. That was, you know, I wanted to have that level of success. And so I took her to lunch at Into the Seventh Ray, and we sat there. I mean, literally, I think it was like 4 hours long. Like, we just total girlfriend bonding. And she really became like my big sister. And she walked me through so much personally, through a huge breakup in my life and heartbreak, and really helped shape my mindset as a teacher. But of course, I chose her because she is, you know, walking her talk. She is one of the most ferociously devoted students of yoga and shadow work. And that's how I want it to be. So you know, find those mentors, you know, 2 or 3 mentors and teachers that you can, that are really available to establish a relationship. And, you know, I mean, I would call her, I'd go up in the back room of Power Yoga, you know, I was going through a massive breakup and completely melting down, calling her on the phone hysterical before my class. And she would just talk me through it, you know, give me the pep talk that I needed. Or I call her to this day, you know, hey, I have this contract that I'm negotiating. What's your advice on this? How should I approach it? And, you know, she's still giving me feedback. So choose a couple mentors, and then also choose a couple of really good peers and colleagues that are in the yoga world, maybe someone that's in the business world that you can go to, again, to support you, to keep you honest. And at this point, you know, pretty much all of my, well, it's true. I mean, all of my best friends are either yoga teachers or therapists. And it's really helpful because, you know, we go to dinner, we have a party, we're there, we're sharing. I mean, it helps you not to feel so alone. And there's very common things, you know, as in psychology, in psychotherapy, when we go to, you know, graduate school and then to get licensed, one of the first things that we are taught to assess for with a client that walks in our room is, you know, suicidality, of course, and major addiction. But literally the very next thing is, what is your support system like? Tell me about your support system. Do you have friends, family, peers, colleagues? And we ask our clients that. Personally, as professionals, we are ethically bound to do what's called peer supervision, which means if stuff starts coming up with you in your private practice of psychotherapy, one of the first things you do is you go to a mentor, you go to a supervisor, and the next step is you go to your peer group where you have peer supervision. So another licensed psychotherapist that can help, you know, bounce ideas, give you some resources, give you some support. And I do this all the time with my dear friend, Daniel Stewart. He's also a yoga teacher and a psychotherapist. And we are calling each other all the time, leaving messages like, hey, this is going on. I really need your support. Can you call me back? Hey, can you give me some reflection on this? You know, and then, or Sean, or, you know, Sarah Ivanhoe, or, you know, these people that I'm, you know, Elena Brower, Stephanie Snyder, like these are the people in my inner circle who I call and I say, listen, I'm going into contract negotiations on this. How did you do it? What do you recommend? Or do you think I should do this project or not? Where, you know, what are your numbers on retreats? How's that looking? How do you guys improve your profit margins? And we're having these conversations all the time. And I wouldn't want to, yeah, it's really important.
I think it's so, so important. And I think you are one of the first ones to actually just put it so clearly. And one of the things that I want to also remind the community here is that you're hearing this and you're like, well, good for you, Ashley, that you can pick up the phone and call, you know, Sean Korn. But she did it at a time where she didn't have the name, right? Ashley was starting too. And so you have to have the initiative. And, you know, in the Eastern tradition, like when we talk about the lotus and sitting at the foot of the lotus and learning from your mentor, you're actually expected to go to your mentor, to look for your mentor just as much as your mentor should be open to mentoring you, right? It needs to be a mutual agreement. But if you're thinking, oh, I don't have the name or the following to pick up the phone, and how would I ever get a hold of those teachers? I think my advice is that you try it, because a lot of those teachers actually are more willing to sit down, like, Sean Corn spending 4 hours with Ashley in their first meeting. Not too many people actually ask them those questions, and they're really genuinely interested in learning their path in this way. So you'll be surprised. I mean, most experts in their area are more than happy to share and to give their best advice that they possibly can, even if it isn't on a continuous basis, that you can just pick up the phone like Ashley used to do, but that you have access to them at least at one time, and that you continue to look for them. And look for those mentors, and obviously peers. I think that's also very important, to stay in the conversation, so that your world actually begins to blend very much with the teaching, right? So it's not separate. It's not like, oh, this is me, yoga teacher, this is me outside of yoga, but it's really like who you are at all times.
Mm-hmm.
So absolutely love that. And to wrap up, Ashley, do you have one last tip that you'd like to give to our teachers?
I think, once you start really building your practice and you're in it, I mean, it is important from a business standpoint to differentiate, and it is important to find your own brand and your own niche. I mean, when I was growing up, luckily, in the late 90s and 2000s, I mean, there weren't that many yoga teachers, and I was lucky to come up in a stage, in a phase where I could establish a name for myself in Santa Monica. And, there was our whole little crew, Micheline, Hala, Vinny, we all were sort of coming up at the same time. And it's difficult now. A lot of markets are saturated, and that's just the honest truth. It's a great thing. There are also infinite people starting yoga every day and more students available, but you do have to be a savvy business owner. So find your niche and differentiate. And what does that look like for you? It's whatever you're most drawn to. Like, think about, what are your greatest passions? Maybe it's a stand-up paddleboard yoga. Maybe it's, for me, it was psychology. And I really thought, okay, I'm going to go for this. I don't know what it looks like. Nobody's really doing it out there. Like, how does yoga and psychotherapy fit together? And I just keep trudging through the forest one step at a time. And now, 10 years later, I'm starting to see how it's going to come into some fruition and fusion. But, whatever it is, you can just start offering workshops on that. I also wrote, as you mentioned, aroma yoga. So aromatherapy in yoga is a class. So then you don't have to overwhelm yourself with you have to do everything. Also, I mean, Karen, this is one of your greatest talents. It's like, don't try to do everything. Do one or two things really well. So maybe it's a menstrual cycle you're really interested in. Start leading workshops on the new moon and the full moon consistently, 2, 3, 4 times a year, and really get people knowing you for that. Or prenatal yoga, or, the handstands, and you see it, on Instagram, or you think like Catherine Budig, and she's really the foodie in yoga and brings in that along with the arm balances, or, so find out what your thing is. And, Jill Miller is a great example of that, who's such an incredible body worker and yoga teacher, and really honed in on the anatomy, and now has yoga tune-up, which is just blowing up. So find your niche, start to work that. It doesn't have to be overwhelming. Just start offering some workshops on that. It's what we did with Urban Priestess, where I had done a priestess training as well. And I thought, well, I really want to lead a priestess training. I don't know what it's going to look like. I don't know how it's going to happen. I don't really want to do it by myself. It seems really overwhelming. But I just started leading workshops everywhere I went. One of the workshops that I did was Urban Priestess. And I started to come up with a formula and feel what worked and what didn't work. And then 5 years into it, I finally really dropped in with Sienna Sherman, and I went to her class at Tadasana Festival. I was like, whoa, she's totally doing priestess work. So I literally went up to her. We started talking. She's like, yeah, I did a whole priestess training. And I'm like, oh my God, so did I. I've had this vision. I really want it bring it into fruition. I don't want to do it alone. I'd like to get into conversation with you about if you'd be interested in doing this. And it took us over 2 years of some really deep dialogue. It was not easy. It was very challenging to weave our worlds and schedules together. But, you know, this year we launched in October Urban Priestess, and it's an incredible year-long training for women, and it's just going to continue to, it's a whole company in and of itself. I mean, it's a separate company. So just start leading workshops and really feeling into what you're passionate about and orbit your career and your material around that and keep deepening into it.
I love it. Love it, love it, love it. And I thank you for saying this. You know, take one thing and go deep. You know, it's like, I think we say, take that horse and ride that horse. You can't ride two horses at the same time. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't jump to another horse at some point, right? But it's really, I love that the way you put it is that you don't differentiate yourself by asking, how can I be different? You ask yourself, what are my gifts and what are my passions? And you're coming from that place. So differentiating yourself that way will be really authentic to you, and you're going to have passion. Like, I mean, I can see your eyes just shining when you talk about the Urban Priestess, because I can tell it's something that you absolutely love. It wasn't like, well, nobody's doing it, it would be really great to do something different. It's like, no, I love this. And I'm going to do it any way I can. And eventually, obviously, this door opened that you meet somebody who is, you know, the perfect partner for you to take this to the next level. And I know it's blowing up and it's a huge success. And I wish I was in it right now with you and Sienna Sherman taking the class. But I really love, basically, it's Ashley Turner to me is an example of, don't sit and think about it so much. If it sparks and it brings you passion, go try it out. And I think that that's one of the best skills for an entrepreneur, because the only way you're going to get better is by trying it out, is putting yourself out there, getting the feedback, and then doing better next time, getting the feedback and doing better next time. And I think, Ashley, you are just a tremendous example of this. So I really want to thank you so much for taking the time and sharing these amazing tips with our teachers. And I'm going to invite everybody to go to www.ashleyturner.org. Make sure it's .org, not .com. If you want to learn a little bit more about her and her programs and get in touch with her, you can say you watched this interview and you got really inspired. Maybe you want her to be your mentor. But definitely check out what she's up to in the world. And I think there's going to be a lot more of Ashley Turner coming up for us to see in the future. And so thank you so much, Ashley. Do you want to say a quick goodbye to our teachers?
No, just thank you so much. You know, trust the winding path. The life is very unpredictable and things take time to gestate and really formulate, and just trust that. But keep showing up for yourself, for your practice, for your students, and trust your passions. You know, that's your dharma, truly. And it's such an honor. Please reach out on Facebook, Instagram, wherever, and send me your questions. And I think I actually need to do a webinar of mentoring, because I do have so many people emailing me about that. And so I'm just like sparked on this interview. I'm going to do a webinar for people, as well.
I'm sure people love that.
Yay.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much. And until next time, namaste.
Thank you.
Oh my God. Okay. I don't think it recorded.
What? Really?
I don't think so.
Is there a way you can check?
I'm going to stop this. I'm going to go check, but stay tuned. I'm going to call you back. Oh my gosh, I cannot believe, because you said that you saw the live. I did too. And
yeah, it says live on mine right here.
Okay, let me stop this.